Hey everyone, it's Evelyn. Now, back around the end of December, I did a video where I posted a bouquet for every week of my growing season, which was that, did the bouquets start in May? Can't even remember, but they went all the way through till approximately mid-November. Now that's great, but it doesn't give you a really good idea of the actual blooming schedule. So I thought what I would do for this video is I had put together, and I haven't been doing this for the last few years because our weather's been so off from before, but I thought I'd put it together for this video and then go over it, which is literally the blooming schedule for the flowers that I grow for my roadside flower wagon. And I color-coded it just with two colors. The pink is focal flowers and the green is filler flowers. I'll hold it up close if you wanted to get a really good look at it for a minute there. If you need to pause the video, you can do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through it month by month, and I'll put up a picture of, what's the first month we're doing here? March and April, actually. I'm going to do them together because what this shows you is that my hyacinths, my tulips, and my daffodils are the first blooming, but the hyacinths is the very first blooming because it starts blooming the third week in March. So you see March, it's got 4 squares, and each square represents a week, first, second, third, and fourth. So I guess it starts blooming the 4th week. And that's much earlier than everything else. So by having started selling hyacinths last year, it allowed me to get my flower wagon up to the road earlier. And not just that, but last year, because in the, I think it was in February, I'm not quite sure, we had an ultra cold night for us. It affected all the buds on my camellia bush, so I didn't even actually have any camellia flowers to sell at the roadside flower wagon last year. And they start blooming around the beginning of April, and nothing else until mid-April, which is when the tulips and daffodils start. So the hyacinths actually carried me through until the tulips and the daffodils started. Now you'll see I have lines going through where I have the hyacinths, and it's because I don't actually know when so I grow the hyacinths, the tulips, and the daffodils in pots, and I don't actually know when the hyacinths would have finished blooming in the pots because I sold out of them. I could only go by the hyacinths that I have growing in one of my flower beds. So those lines kind of represent, and I don't quite know when they finish. Now, if you've never seen my videos before and you are a little curious as to what I mean by the flower wagon, this is a picture of my flower wagon. So in the early spring, when the daffodil, tulip, and hyacinths pots start to bloom, or even before they start to bloom, I can get it up to the road. I have 3 steps off of one side, so I can get lots of pots in there. And then on a top shelf, where I would normally be selling small vases, I have sheets that show the pictures of each of the daffodil, tulip, or hyacinths and the price points of the pots. And the reason I do that is because that allows me to take the pots up to the flower wagon before they're blooming. I use a grease pencil and write on the outside of the 1-gallon pots what they are. So somebody can look at the pictures and say, I really want XYZ tulip, and then they can look at the pots and go, there's the XYZ, whether it's blooming or not. So that has worked out really well. So even though the hyacinths start blooming long before the tulips and the daffodils, I will have tulips and daffodils up at the roadside flower wagon. And while people are stopping because of the color show of the hyacinths, and that's what they want to buy, they will also buy tulips and daffodils. Not always, sometimes. And that will increase my sales for the day by being able to sell the pots of tulips and daffodils before they're actually blooming. Now on here, you can also see that for the 4th week in April, my giant Solomon seal and my bluebells start blooming, neither of which are great for the flower wagon, so I don't really do bouquets with them. The giant Solomon seal is simply too tall. It grows in deep shade in one of my flower beds, so if the flower wagon, it's a sunny day, the coming out of the deep shade and going into the sun is too much of a shock to the system of that flower. I love growing it because it does bloom in deep shade. And the bluebells aren't long enough, so I will use them, but I will use them once the signs for the daffodils, tulips, and hyacinths are gone. Then I can put small vases up there, and I'll do little flower arrangements with the bluebells in them. And if the camellias were blooming, which they have in previous years, and cross my fingers, they will bloom again this year, they will go up as bouquets. So I won't have as many pots of the spring bulbs blooming, not blooming, in the flower wagon. I'll keep them on the steps and maybe half the flower wagon. And I'll put up 1 or 2 bouquets of the camellias. And they pair really nicely with cherry blossoms. This is a sand cherry. The blossoms come before the leaves, but you do get the beginning of the leaves with that beautiful burgundy texture in it. And the leaves that are in this particular bouquet are the actual the shiny green ones, are actually from the camellia bush. They have a beautiful shiny green leaf. And I should be able to do that again this year. Couldn't do it last year, but was able to do it for the previous years. So then after the camellia, which is really my first cut flower that shows up in my flower wagon, like I said, I have the giant Solomon seal. I can use that if it's a cloudy, rainy day, which I do. And then again, of course, once the signs for the hyacinths, daffodils, and tulips are gone, and they don't have to all be gone. The hyacinths one can be gone, will be gone soon. And then I can start putting up a few little vases. And as you can see, in this particular vase arrangement, I am using bluebells. My bluebells grow tall because, again, they grow in a shady spot. But it's a shady spot that does get sun for a good portion of the day. They grow in a very wet area, too. They actually grow best where the big go from one of our roof drains out. And right where it drains out, right along there is where the bluebells grow. So they're really, really happy in that wet spot. In this particular vase arrangement, I have kale flowers. I have candy tuft, which is down low. So you can see here that even though candy tuft is basically a very, very short-stemmed flower, that beautiful white flower can be used very low in arrangement around the mouth of a vase. And that helps break the line of the vase to the flowers, so that visually you have one continual vista. Whereas if you have a vase and then stems and then flowers, it kind of breaks it and makes your eye jump back and forth. By being able to break the line of the vase mouth, it creates a more complete look, a more restful look to the eye, and a more interesting look, because you don't have vase, stems, flowers. You have a completely contained image. It also has hosta leaves with it, and 1 branch of astilbe leaves out that side coming up. There's also a couple of dried poppy pods in that. So there's quite a bit happening in this little tiny vase arrangement, and I did sell this one. So then, after the giant Solomon seal and the bluebells, we are moving into May to see what's blooming there, because I didn't have anything else blooming in March and April other than those few things. And there's quite a few more things blooming, but you can see I have a weak spot right mid-May. So right where the tulips ended, if you travel down that line of focal flowers, there's no focal flowers until you hit peony and red rhododendrons, and they're starting right when those tulip pots are finishing. I do have some fillers like the giant Solomon seal and the bluebells and columbine, which I'll use in small, again, vase arrangements, but generally not in bouquets. But it's a little tricky because, and of course this is just last year, so it's weather dependent. There could be a better overlap of that mid-May time, but it was very, very tricky. Now, when I have that line, I probably had a few peonies blooming before that and a few of the red rhododendrons blooming before that. But if there's a few blooming, that's not where I'm saying they're starting blooming just because you have a few blooming. It's when they're really starting to bloom. Kind of like when you start seeds in your seed room, you don't say the seeds are up just because 6 out of 50 are up or whatever. You wait until over 50% are blooming and you have a good amount to use. So there wouldn't have been a dead spot there, but I would have been a little bit panicking that I wasn't going to be having enough flowers to continue on. And for this reason, like if you travel down even farther, you'll see my Globe Master Alliums. That's where it says Alliums Globe. I know, thanks to Florists on Farms, that right before the Globe Master, I think she called it Purple Sensation. I wrote it down. Alliums bloom before the Globe Master and do bloom for Mother's Day. So I had wanted to buy some so that I could maybe not have such a little panicking moment right at that point. But unfortunately, I couldn't. It was too late for me to order them from my wholesaler. They either weren't in my local garden centers, or they had sold out when I got there. And you do have to buy them in the fall, so I can't really do anything about that this year. But I will definitely be getting them from my wholesaler, which I have to place my order for next year's spring bulbs this spring. I will definitely be adding that onto the list. So as you can see here, at the beginning of May, I still have my tulips blooming. I still have the daffodils. I have the giant Solomon seal, the bluebells, the columbine. I'm getting the peonies, and it's the Ito peonies, not the herbaceous ones. The herbaceous ones start blooming later for me. Red rhododendron. I have a pink rhododendron in my yard that's blooming, but it's not a good cut flower. The red one is actually in my neighbor's yard, hangs way over the fence and has to get trimmed back. That one makes a much better cut flower. My kale flowers are blooming. The Globe Master Alliums, which are the really big purple heads, the anemones, and the ranunculus. So we'll go through them one by one in pictures. So this is the columbines, and as you can see, I will do it in a vase arrangement. But I'm not really particularly fond of using columbines in bouquets. I find that really, really stiff stem. I mean, it's like a stick. It's so stiff. Hard to use within my bouquets the way I create bouquets. I'm not so much a market bouquet maker where everything is just like going straight up and then you just look at the top of it around its wrap. I like to have a full voluminous bouquet in the style that I do. These are the Ito peonies, and these are the 8 that I grow. And they don't all bloom at the same time. They sort of, one starts blooming and then 4 or 5 days later another one starts blooming, and so forth and so on. And they will finish in sort of the same order as they start. And if you look at this bouquet here, and you can see here that I don't do the wrap with just the flowers up the top that you have to look into. I keep the wrap low, and the interest of the bouquet is not just at the top, but actually all the way around, kind of the way you would look at it if you put it in a vase. And here you can see I have one of the Globe Master Alliums up high. I have the Bartzella Yellow Ito peony in the middle there. I have, what is that pink peony that's off to that side? I'm just going to open up my peonies again so I can see what it is. That is, looks like the strawberry creme brulee. The little yellow flowers with their beautiful wonky stems, that's the kale flowers. I have sand cherry branches, which is the purple leaf. I have snowberry branches, which is the small pairs of green leaves. And I have a long-needled pine branch tucked in low for that beautiful spiky texture. And they look spiky, but they're actually very, very soft to the touch. So this next, oh, I didn't tell you when that bouquet was made. That particular bouquet was made on May 27th. So this next bouquet was made on May 25th, and it's got the yellow Bartzella Ito peony. That's my favorite Ito peony, by the way. It's got a allium head out the back. It's got the kale flowers, but in these particular branches, a lot of the kale flowers are gone, but you've got the little seed pods, which really look cool in there as well. You've got the sand cherry, you've got the red rhododendron, but you also have my, what is that called? Pinecrest maple? Pinecrest gold maple? I'm going to guess that that's what it's called. If it's wrong, I'll put it up on the screen. This is what the kale flowers look like in my garden. So you can see it's quite prolific in the way it's pushing out flowers. And it's a kale plant that has, well, 2 that have perennialized. This will be the 4th spring that I'll be going through with these 2 plants. I actually planted 6 of them. 2 of them perennialized and 4 of them did not. And here's another bouquet where you can see the kale flowers in it with the snowberry branches, the strawberry creme brulee, Ito peony. You can see there's Bartzella Ito peony in the back. And a little bit of sand cherry branches in there as well. So the Globe Master Allium is really interesting because it blooms right before the Ambassador Alliums. And there's a difference in diameter of those two alliums, but they're exactly the same color. And what alliums do is they start off as a really tight head of purple, and then they slowly start, the little tiny flowers in that sphere start stretching. And as they stretch, the globe of little purple flowers becomes looser, but also bigger and bigger and bigger. And you can't tell at some point from photos which is a Globe Master and which is an Ambassador, because it all depends on what time you harvested the flower. You can tell in where they're growing, because the patch of Globe Master will be much bigger than the Ambassador if they're still blooming at the same time. But they time themselves so well that just as you finished harvest, well, for me, for how many I've planted, just as I'm finished harvesting the Globe Masters, the Ambassadors are ready to start harvesting. So that works out really, really well. So here's another bouquet that I took on June 6th. And as you can see, there's a large Globe Master in there. Could be an Ambassador because now we're into June. I don't really know. Again, the kale flowers, the snowberry branches, again, that looks like a strawberry cream brulee, Ito peony. But now I have a softer pink Ito peony in there, which looks like pink double dandy. So clearly, if you look at the previous bouquets that I did, that hadn't shown up yet. So it's a slightly later blooming one, which is really cool. It's got the pine crest gold maple leaves, the sand cherry, and it's got a white ranunculus in it. So at this point, the ranunculus is definitely starting to bloom as well. So also starting to bloom, let me look at my chart because I don't have the picture up anymore. The anemones, yeah, so they started blooming towards the end of May. So that's where we are in my blooming schedule, and the anemones have started to bloom. And the two that I really enjoyed using was the anemone de Sion Sylphide, the anemone Marron Bordeaux. And I used them again with Globe Master. Well, I'm going to say this is now an Ambassador Allium, but it's also got a purple Atropurpureum Allium in there. It's got a hair Allium. It's got parsley umbels. It's got a salmon ranunculus. And you can see in the back there is the Sylphide de Sion anemone, and or is that, no, that looks more like, I don't know what that is. I think it's a rose bonbon ranunculus, because the purple Sion anemone is up front, and it's definitely a paler color. And I've got laurel leaves in with this as well. So the ranunculus, when did the ranunculus start blooming? They started blooming after the anemones by about half a week. So I've actually got them starting to bloom for the beginning of June. And these are the four that I really enjoyed using: Pauline, Amandine White, Amandine Marshmallow, and Amandine Salmon. And you can see this bouquet, I still got the Ambassador Alliums going. I've got the white ranunculus. I've got the yellow Bartzella Ito peony. I've got the snowberry branches, and that looks like it's about it. And this bouquet was taken on June 9th. So then we have a pause while I ask you all if you could please give this video a like if you're enjoying it, and let's carry on. We're now going to move into the next month. Now, the next month is, where are we now? I can't even remember where I finished talking. Just one sec. Give me 1 second. You can be hitting the like button while I figure out where oh yeah, right. We just finished May, so we're moving into June. Oh, it's a little confusing for me. So we're moving into June, and we already talked about the anemones and the ranunculus, because they sort of start blooming right around the end of May and start happening or definitely happening for all of the month of June. I'm going to look at my sheet rather than on the computer. You've got it up here. And I also have then after them the Ambassador Allium. Oh, so all the alliums that I was talking about before were definitely Globe Master, because my Ambassador Allium didn't start blooming until the second week of June. So I made an error while I was talking. My bachelor buttons are coming on. The herbaceous peonies are coming on. Foxgloves hair alliums. Well, I showed you I showed you a few bouquets that were already in June because I wanted to show something that was happening in May in them. Sweet peas, sunflowers, snapdragons, yarrow, astilbe, my first dahlia, which was Arabian Nights, and the astilbe, the first astilbe that bloomed was the Bridal Veil. And that was the only astilbe that bloomed in the month of June, which we're into right now. I'm going to get totally confused as I go through all this stuff. I already talked about how the Globe Master and the Ambassador one follows after the other, because like I said, the Ambassador allium started the second week of June, but if you look up on the sheet, the Globe Master allium, well, it says it finished kind of around the second week of June, but I don't really know because I used them all up. So they probably may have been able to continue going. This is why it gets confusing, because there's overlaps and depends on the year and you run out of flowers and so forth and so on. So here you can see this is an Ambassador allium, and you can see you can't tell the difference. So this is June 13th. And I've got it paired with an Atropurpureum allium as well, which doesn't show up on my sheet because I only have about maybe a half a dozen at the most growing in the garden, but I use them when they bloom. I've got the parsley umbels again, the black button, bachelor button popping up the top, which is the dark purple flower. I've got 2 white ranunculus, 1 blush ranunculus, which is the pink one, and a really, really pale Ito peony, which is the pastel splendor, as well as laurel leaves around the base, and I've got snowberry branches. So for the black button bachelor buttons, it's I've tried all of well, not all, but I've tried quite a few of the bachelor button colors, and the only one I really truly like is the black button one. So that's why that's the only one that I grow. And that one bloomed from the second week in June all the way through into August. I didn't mark down when they finished. I think they were still blooming, but I just stopped using them because they weren't blooming as strongly as they had been before because it was just getting too hot for them. So you can see this particular bouquet, again, will have the Ambassador allium because this is a June 18th bouquet. It's got the black button popping up the top, the parsley umbels. It has a rose bonbon ranunculus off to that side, a salmon ranunculus off to that side, which is the orange one. It's got a Sylphide de Sion anemone, which is the sort of fuchsia one poking off to that side. It's got a white ranunculus right above it. It's got the darker anemone who's, oh, what is the name of that darker anemone? I can never remember. That is called Anemone Marron Bordeaux is the darker one. And laurel leaves. Oh, there's a hair allium in here. So if you look right at the top of the Ambassador allium, and if you look right behind it, you can just see a hair allium with its super, super fun texture. So then is when my herbaceous peonies started blooming. Now, I only have 6 of them. I believe I have 3 of the white and 3 of the pink. They came in a mixed bag, so I'm not 100% sure what their names are. They are not in their 4th year yet, so I only got a few blooms from them, and I had to move them because when my husband had bought them for me as a surprise, and when he bought them for me, I had no idea where I was going to plant them. So I just planted them because they needed planting in spots that I knew wasn't good spots for them. And it took me about another 1.5 years before I figured out where I wanted to plant them. So they had to get dug up and moved, which set them back. So even though they're in the 3rd year, they're all actually also set back, even though they're in their 3rd year. And they bloomed just for 1 week, which was the 2nd week of June. And I'm sure if they're in their 4th or 5th year, that will not be the case because I did only get a few flowers. Not even all 6 of the plants bloomed, just a couple of them. I think 3 or 4 of them, and they all had like maybe one or 2 flowers on them at the most. But they sure are pretty. So then we're going to talk about, I don't even have a photograph of them in bouquets. I don't know how I missed those. It's probably one of those days where, you know, there are some days when I get my flower wagon up to the road and there's people waiting to buy the bouquets that I have. So then I got to scramble, run back down and make more bouquets and scramble them back up there. And often they don't get photographed because now I'm in a hurry and then I'm, you know, also trying to get to work. So often if it's a morning rush, bouquets don't get photographed. So in this particular photo, we have foxglove as well as a couple of alliums that I don't talk about because they were a mixed bag that I bought years ago. Don't know what the names of them are, and I only have a few of each. So they're just sort of, when they bloom, I use them, but I don't know what they are, and there's so few of them, like there's 3 of each, that it's not worth talking about. But the foxgloves, they bloom for me from the second week of June all the way through to the end of the first week of July. So they bloom for quite a while. They're native to the area that I live in, so they just sort of pop up wherever they want to pop up. There's too many of them. I have to weed quite a few of them out because they just literally will bloom everywhere. They grow very tall for me, and I will use them in bouquets, but for some reason, I don't find that they hold up well in my bouquets at the roadside flower wagon. So again, I prefer to use them on, it doesn't have to be really cloudy and or rainy, but I don't like to use them on really, really hot days. So they will get used at the beginning of their blooming month when it's not as hot out. Because June, we're generally not that hot out yet. So this particular bouquet was taken on June 10th. It's got the white ranunculus, it's got a rose bonbon ranunculus, it's got an atropurpureum allium up top, it's got the ambassador allium behind, it's got some snowberry branches, and of course a foxglove. And they are pretty. They're kind of a cross, well, they're not a cross. They look very, the way they texture out, they're very similar to snapdragons. But they definitely have a way longer blooming stalk on them than a snapdragon does. Some of them have really, really long bloom stalks. So then comes the hair alliums, which bloom from about mid-June, and I use them till just after the first week of July. And I love using them as a little filler flower because of their texture. As you can see in this bouquet, which was taken on June 23rd, so that will be an ambassador allium, and you can see the hair allium right above it looking really cool. It's now got snapdragons in this particular bouquet, as well as parsley umbels and a black button bachelor button. Oops. We're now going to talk about sweet peas. So my sweet peas start blooming. Wow, they didn't start blooming for me until the final week of June, whereas every other year they started blooming around the beginning of June. That's interesting. And they bloom right through till the beginning of September. And the way I get them to bloom for such a long time period is I plant them behind other things. So in my front flower beds, I have a flower bed that runs the length of the fence that divides us from our neighbors. I have 2 rows of dahlias. Then I have a whole pile of breadseed poppies. And then I have the sweet peas up against the fence. So they start growing before the dahlias. Well, they're planted long before the dahlias. So they're ahead of the dahlias as far as growing goes. So the tops of them are always above the dahlias. But as the dahlias are growing, they're growing as the weather's getting warmer, but they're keeping the feet and the bottom part of those sweet peas well protected. The other place I grow sweet peas is in one of my backyard flower beds, and it's where I have the 6 herbaceous peonies that create like a C. And then in the hole, the negative space of the C is where I grow my potatoes. And then behind them all along the length of that bed, about 2 feet in, again from the same fence line to the neighbors, although it's a different fence because it's her fence, I have like 1-inch sticks that I put in that are ripped on our table saw from a 2x4. And I have the sweet peas growing up those. Now the sweet peas I will use in pop can arrangements. You've seen pop can, how I do my pop can arrangements if you've watched any of my previous videos, but I'll put it up here again. You won't see any of the sweet peas in it because, of course, I took only one picture. Unfortunately, I only took one picture of my pop can arrangements last year, and that had dahlias in it. I'm going to remedy that this year and take pictures of them throughout the season so that I can use them to show how I display the different flowers within the pop cans. Usually when I'm doing sweet peas, I will just have sweet peas and nothing else in there with them. So it'll be a little small bunch of short stems of sweet peas. But I will also use them in custom bouquets because I think they add a lot to a bouquet. But I don't like using them in my regular roadside flower wagon bouquets because they are more time consuming because they get tangled a bit. And I want to be able to make the roadside flower wagon bouquets really quickly for the price point. But I will always use them in my custom bouquets. And because they bloom all summer long, I have them to use them. It also makes the custom bouquets, therefore, different than the roadside flower wagon bouquets. And also, as you can see in this particular bouquet, which was taken on July 15th, I also have borage in there, which is also something that I use to make the bouquet look different. So then, the next flower that I'm going to talk about on my list of an order of blooming is sunflowers. And for me, they start blooming the final week in June, and of course they go straight through until I either run out or the frost kills them. And this past year, I only grew 4 types: white light, orange, gold light, and white night. And I did that because the previous years I had grown other colors, and I found that they didn't perform as well as these 4. And then this past year, I found that I missed the other colors. I found just using those shades of white and those shades of yellow or gold kind of boring. So I want to add in some of the other colors back, which would be the red sunflower, the plum. I did add in the red lemon a little bit later on in the season last year, and I was really happy that I did that because it did give me a slightly different look to the bouquets that I was going to use. And as you can see in this bouquet, which was taken on July 15th, I was able to pair it with anemones still, which is the deep dark burgundy Marron Bordeaux, I think I said it was called, just off to that side of it. There's a slightly dried ambassador in the middle, just for being used as filler and volume. I've got my purple marjoram flowers, I've got breadseed poppy pods, I've got my black button bachelor buttons, and if you look in the back, there's a drumstick allium as well. And again, my laurel leaves. The next flower we're going to talk about, which you've already seen in a couple of bouquets, is snapdragons. So snapdragons are really, really interesting. So they bloom really big and strong and thick-stemmed and tall spikes of flowers that you can use. So my snapdragons started blooming for the final week in June. So I used those really strong, beautiful, bold statement flowers for 3 weeks. And then they were not blooming as strong. They became more of a filler flower after that. But what I did is I cut them back. I had to take actually out 2/3 of them to make room for other plantings of sunflowers. But I left 1/3 and cut it back to see how that would affect the blooms for maybe creating a second flush in the fall, because I'd never done that before. So I didn't have any snapdragons until September, and then the second flush happened, and it happened right through until mid-November, or actually it happened right through until our first killing frost, which was towards the end of November, although I shut my flower wagon down middle of November. And I loved using them as a filler flower. They're much smaller. The spikes were like half the size. The stems were quite a bit thinner. They were definitely not the spring showcase flower, but boy, were they useful in the fall, that 1/3 of the snapdragon bed that I left blooming, or left growing. So happy I did that. So that's definitely something I'm going to be continuing to do with each year forward, is having snapdragons have that focal flower in the beginning, cut them back, and then have that second flush that just goes straight through for, what did I say? September, October, and November until the first killing frost. Very, very useful late season flower, fall flower. I loved it. That was so great. Anyway, here you can see it's paired with an ambassador allium. This picture was taken on June 26th. So the photos that I'm using for the bouquets are kind of jumping all over the place in date, but I'm trying to grab the one that really showcases the flower that I'm talking about the best, which in this case is snapdragons. And as you can see, I've got the allium collared with those beautiful spikes of snapdragon flowers. Just loved it. And I've got a hair allium in there. I've got a black button bachelor buttons and some parsley umbels. So we're now going to talk about July. And July, as you can see up here, I'm going to look down at my sheet because it's too hard for me to look at it on the computer. I can use my fingers and point on here and know what I'm talking about. So again, we've got the black button or bachelor buttons continuing through that month. We've got the foxgloves and the hair alliums finishing after the first week of July. The sweet peas, of course, are continuing through. Sunflowers will continue through and are continuing through. The snapdragons went till the middle of July, pardon me, before I got rid of half of them and just cut the other, got rid of 2/3 of them and then cut the other third back. I've got my yarrow with a question mark because I don't have a very big patch of yarrow, and so I used up what I had. I've got a very, very small patch, so I didn't use it a lot in bouquets because I simply don't have that much of it. And again, then I use it up, so then I don't know when it's going to continue and go through too. My Astilbe bridal veil sort of was the last week of July and just barely last week of June and just barely into July. My Dahlia Arabian Night, of course, is the first dahlia, also continues through right till the end because they go till the first killing frost, which for us was towards the end of November. My pink Astilbe was starting to bloom and bloomed for 2 weeks. My full-headed Shasta daisies bloomed for 2 weeks, but could have bloomed for longer because, again, I used them all up. I have, is it 2 or 3 clumps of those full-headed Shasta daisies? And I bought them 2 years ago, so this is the year they'll be in their leap from the sleep, creep, leap scenario. So I should have a lot more of those to use this upcoming year. My red Astilbe started showing up around the middle of July for about a week. Now, the interesting thing about the 3 colors of Astilbe that I have is they bloom for about 1 to 2 weeks each, depending on the weather, which depends on the year. And they have an order. It goes white, pink, red. So as one's finishing, the next is starting. As that's finishing, the next is starting. So I have Astilbe for about a month, but it goes white, pink, red over the course of that month, which is pretty interesting. And I like having a lot of it because I will also cut a lot of it before it loses its color and keep it to use as a dried texture in my autumn bouquets. And I will leave some of the plants to use as a non-dried but brown texture as well in the autumn bouquets. My drumstick alliums, I have no idea when they finished because I used them all up. Then I have my marjoram, which started blooming mid-July, and of course I have purple and white of that. My dinner plate dahlias this past year started mid-July. Normally they would start about a week or maybe. I have had them start in the first week of July, and I've had them start in the second week of July. This is the only year that I've had them start in the third week of July. And that would be it for the flowers in July. So let's go through them one by one. But before I do that, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Really appreciate that. I'm slowly working up to that 1,000 subscription. I have my watch hours. You need 4,000 watch hours in the last 365 days to get monetized, and you need 1,000 subscribers. I'm well over the 4,000 watch hours, so I've got that all covered. I just need some more subscribers. Clearly you guys like my videos because I've got the watch hours. Anyway, we're going to talk about yarrow now. So these are the 4 colors that I have, and I literally have very, very small clumps of them, like, you know, clumps that big of each color. I have a very, very small patch of them. I would like to increase the size of the patch that I have of yarrow. The place that they're growing is very small. It's just a little triangular area. I don't know where I would plant them to increase their amount. I had tried to increase their amount in one other area, which is where the Globemaster alliums are now growing, but they didn't do well there. They got shaded out. So I have to figure that out because I do want to grow more alliums. I just don't know where yet. So here you can see how beautiful they look in a bouquet. So they're paired with the snapdragons. This bouquet was taken on June 26th, actually, not July. Pretty close. And even though Yarrow is considered a filler flower. Look how non-filler it looks in this bouquet with the snapdragons. I mean, it looks pretty focal in there. The snapdragons and the yarrow just on their own look stunning together. It's not much of a filler texture. Then we're going to talk about the white Astilbe, which I love. I've got 2 clumps of the Bridal Veil white Astilbe, and I think it's really pretty in a bouquet. There's very few white flowers that I grow because I find them hard to use in a bouquet, but I love the white Astilbe. It's really hard to see in this bouquet because I've got such a light backdrop. This was taken on June 26th as well, and it's paired with snapdragons as well, but that texture of that white Astilbe is just so frothy. Love it. Now, I mentioned that the Arabian Nights was the first decorative dahlia that bloomed well, first dahlia, it's a decorative dahlia. But all of the decorative dahlias and the ball dahlias will start blooming before the dinner plate dahlias. This bouquet shows the Arabian Nights off to that side, which is the dark red spot. I call it a black hole because you really can't see the texture of the flower. But it's also got an Edinburgh ball or decorative dahlia right beside it, which is the purpley crimson one with the white tips. You can definitely see the texture within that particular bouquet, and that's flower. And then that is it for the decorative dahlias in there, but you can see I've got it paired with sunflower, 2 sunflowers, one off on either side, rose bonbon cosmos in the back. And you can see here I've got the brown Astilbe because this is a much later bouquet. It was taken on September 21st. So after the Bridal Veil Astilbe finished, I mentioned my pink Astilbe started. Don't know the name of it because it's one that I've carried with me for years and years and years. And, you know, I've dug up clumps of it from probably when we lived in Cortez and took it to the home that we had here in Campbell River before we moved to this one. So it's been around for a while. We left Cortez in 2005. So I've had clumps of this Astilbe travel with me for 20 years. But we also lived on Cortez for 13 years. So I've had this particular pink Astilbe for over 30 years. Anyway, so I love it. It's a beautiful, beautiful frothy pink, and it adds quite its own nice impact of color in a bouquet. This particular one, it doesn't look as frothy because it's coming towards the end of its lifespan on the plant, which means it's starting to dry, which is why it looks a little crispier and less frothy, but it still adds that pink and that beautiful spike of color in the bouquet. It's just a slightly different texture. This particular bouquet was taken on July 15th. I've got it paired with one of the full-headed Shasta daisies. Forget what the name of it is right now. I think it's Snowdrift. And I've got the breadseed poppy pods poking up the top. I've got sunflowers ringing around the bottom. And there is another Marron Bordeaux anemone off to the side. And it's July 15th. So you can see I'm still using anemones well into the middle of July in my bouquets, which is kind of cool. Okay, Snowdrift Semi-Double Shasta Daisy. That's what it's called. One day I will remember the name of that one as well. And this is a Shasta Daisy that I absolutely love. In fact, I was walking through the garden center, not the Campbell River Garden Center, it was actually the Canadian Tire Garden Center because they have a pretty big garden center there. And I was at, every time I have to go to Canadian Tire for whatever reason, I will go through their garden center. And they had some 1-gallon pots of this particular flower. And I went and took a double take it, and I went, what is that? I have to have that. So I bought 2 or 3 1-gallon pots of that. And that was 2 years ago. So like I said, this will be the 3rd summer it's gone through, so it should be in its leaf phase. So I should finally be able to get lots of these because it's a really, really pretty white flower. And again, there's not that many white flowers that I grow because there's not that many white flowers that I like. I used to grow white dinner plate dahlias, the Florel, and there was a couple of other that I had tried. I can't remember the names of them. But I found a large section of white in a bouquet because a dinner plate dahlia is quite big. It's too much white mass. I much like it in a much smaller amount. So the Bridal Veil Astilbe and the Snowdrift Semi-Double Shasta Daisy, I really, really enjoy using in bouquets because they're just that little little spots of sunlight. And this particular one, as I said, bloomed for, well, I used for 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of July, and then I ran out of them. And you can see in this particular bouquet, again, I've got a Marron Bordeaux anemone with it. I've got sunflowers, I've got the breadseed poppy podge, and bachelor buttons and the laurel leaves, and this bouquet was taken on July 10th. So then I have the red astilbe, and it's the same thing. I have carried, that was on our property on Cortez, and I've had chunks of it with me for the last too many years. So I don't know what it's called either. And again, this particular bouquet, it's running towards the end of its lifespan, so it's looking a little crisper than it does when it's that full frothy head. And I have it paired with the Wizard of Oz, ball dahlias, the white knight sunflower, breadseed poppy pods, and there's another one of those Shasta daisies in the back, and laurel leaves. And this bouquet, I said, was taken on July 16th. Yeah. So I have drumstick allium on here. Did I write that down? Oh, I did. I had no idea that I had written down the drumstick allium. Unusual, because again, I only have about 6 to 12 of those growing, but I do really enjoy them. So I probably wrote down the blooming time because I was thinking of potentially increasing my stock of those. So they started blooming about 1.5 weeks into July, and I have no idea when they bloomed till, because I only had less than a dozen of them blooming. And as soon as they bloomed, I used them. And that's probably why I wrote that time down, is because in my mind, I thought I need more of these. And we'll probably order more of those again when I do my spring order with my wholesaler. You can see one of the drumstick alliums poking out at the back of this bouquet that has the sunflowers lower down. Again, you can see the yarrow higher up, and that doesn't look so fillery. It looks like a beautiful focal splash of red. And part of the reason for that is because if you put a bunch of yarrow stems together, it makes a bigger head and creates more of a focal look. If you're just using 1 or 2 little spikes of it, okay, that's a filler. But I like to group them together so that they look like a bigger flower. Anyway, I've got the breadseed poppy pods poking up the top as well as the laurel leaves. And this particular bouquet was taken on July 13th. Now we're going to talk about what ended up being one of my most favorite fillers of last year, and that's marjoram or oregano. I call it marjoram because I don't consider it to be oregano, but the places where you can buy seeds call it oregano. Marjoram is a little sweeter than oregano, and we find that the leaves of it seem to be sweeter than when you buy oregano spice, so that's why we call it the marjoram, but they're basically the same plant. It might just be the difference in where they're grown. Oregano might be just literally grown in Greece, and then the marjoram is grown here in North America. I don't know. Anyway, I always grew it for the herbal aspects of it for my husband for cooking, because he uses quite a bit of marjoram in cooking. And I've got it growing in quite a few different places, and it's a spreader. Like it will self-seed in areas and then also grow from runners. Like if the plant flops down, it'll put out roots and it'll increase its mass that way. So I was always pulling lots of it up, and I had noticed the previous year that one patch had gone to bloom and it was white, which I thought, well, that's weird. So I let a few other patches bloom too to see if they were white, and all the other ones were purple. So I thought, well, that's kind of cool. I'm going to keep one white patch and one purple patch in my back garden beds. And the rest I'm going to pull up wherever they're coming up. And I want to keep one white, one purple for whatever reason, just because they were different. It's the same I do with sage. I've got some sage pots that have the standard blue flower, and I've got a couple that have white flowers. So I keep it just because it's different. And I don't even like sage. We don't use it for cooking, and I don't use it in my bouquets. Don't know why I'm keeping them, but I am. But this past year, I thought, well, why don't I just let them bloom and use them as a filler and see if I like them, because it's such an easy plant to grow. I mean, I'm literally, it's like the foxgloves and the breadseed poppies and a few other things. They're just like, and the borage, they just sort of like, if you let them, they'll take over. So they grow really, really easy. The only maintenance they have is keeping their size down. And it turns out I absolutely loved using them in bouquets. You can see them in this bouquet. I've got them with the gladiola, which is espresso gladiola. the sunflowers and the breadseed poppy pods, and that awesome texture of that purple marjoram just adds so much life and lightness and airiness to what otherwise would be quite a solid bouquet. Fell in love with using it as a filler in bouquets, and it bloomed forever for me. It bloomed starting mid-July straight up through to the killing frost. So it's a long-lasting filler, just blooms and blooms and blooms and blooms and blooms, and I loved using it. So before I'm going to carry on with the next flower, I'm going to remind you that the last Wednesday of this month, I am going to do a Q&A of the previous videos for February. And this is the last February video, I believe. I hope I'm not saying that wrong. Maybe I am. Just one sec. Let me double check. I'm probably all confused on that. Time is just flies by, and then I don't remember what I'm doing. Yeah, it is, because this is coming out on the 22nd of February. I'm filming this on Monday, so Saturday will be the 22nd. And then just a few days later on the 26th will be my Q&A. So make sure you get your questions in, because I am only going to answer any questions that are asked of me today or Sunday, because I will be filming the Q&A on Monday and it will be going live on Wednesday. So I just thought I'd remind you guys of all of that before this video finished. So that was it for July. We're now going to move on to August. And August is really interesting because there's way less things for me to use. I've got my marjoram, which lasts straight through the killing frost. I've got my dahlias, which last through the killing frost. I've got my cosmos now starting, which probably would have started before, but I was deadheading them to make thicker stems and fuller, stronger, more impactful, spiky flower leaves on them, which I did every year. And then because I got really, really busy with work and life and all that other kind of stuff, I wasn't able to deadhead them, and they started blooming. And so I just started using the blooms and discovered that I actually really, really do enjoy using them in bouquets, the blooms. So I don't think I'll be deadheading them this year. So I'll be finding out when they actually start blooming. The other thing is I plant them a little bit later than probably most people, because they're literally going where my Globemaster and my Ambassador alliums are. So as soon as the leaves die back on them, I get my Cosmos seedlings in there into those spots. I can't plant them before that because the Globemaster and the Ambassador alliums have quite long and wide leaves on them, and you have to leave them to get the energy for next year's blooms. And they kind of create a mat on the soil until they've dried up, or until they're completely brown and you just cut them away. So I can't plant the cosmos underneath the leaves. They simply won't get any sun and they'll get squashed by the leaves. So they are planted out quite late. But if I don't deadhead them, they will certainly bloom earlier, and I'll find out when that is this upcoming year. And then that is the only... Well, no, I can slide back up and say, what else is blooming? I've got my sunflowers, of course, which go to the end. I've got my sweet peas, which go till September. I don't have any snapdragons because they have been cut back for their second flush. And I've just got the end, the very, very end of the bachelor buttons. So, whoops. Let's look at what we're going to talk about first, which is my dinner plate dahlias. Now, I could have talked about them in July because they did start blooming in the middle of July, but I'm going to talk about them here in August because that's when I was really using them and really, really relying on them. And these particular four are four that I used a lot of. I've got quite a few more than that. If you look at my top 10 dahlias, you'll see what my top 10 favorites are. So there's definitely more than these four dinner plates that I use, but I won't go into which each and every one of them are. In this particular bouquet, you can see I have AC Loomis off to that side, which is the crimson one with the white frosting. I have Lindsay Michelle off to that side, which has the sort of donut of yellow, and then the fuchsia outer leaves as well as the fuchsia center. I have a Gold Light Sunflower down below, lots of bachelor buttons up the top, and a little bit of the white marjoram as well in the center, as well as some of the purple marjoram off to the side. This bouquet was taken on August 2nd. So the cosmos that I grow are the double click variety. I grew last year the Snow Puff double click as well as the Rose Bonbon double click. This year I'm going to grow a couple of more. I forget what the names of them are. I think one's the Bicolor Violet, and I don't remember what the name of the other one is. I'll put both of them up on the screen. But I haven't grown those before, so that'll be new. I do want to grow more of the double clicks because I really did love using them in bouquets. You can see in this particular bouquet, I've got several of the Rose Bonbon coming out the top, as well as one of the Snow Puff ones growing up the top. But right straight up the top is a cosmos without a flower on it. So you can see how I was originally planning on using it for that beautiful texture of spiky leaves. And you can see how strong and how much spike is on that stem, and that's because I had been deadheading the flowers. So the foliage aspect of it was becoming more dominant, whereas if you look at a lot of other farms that grow cosmos, the stems are really kind of ugly. They're just growing it for the flower, and they're just growing into these really tall, spindly, kind of ugly looking stems with the flower. But that doesn't matter because they're using it for the flower and you don't see the stem. But the way I was doing it, I really wanted to use those spiky stems for the texture. In here also is my second flush of snapdragons now, and this is Costa Silver. I've got a Keith H. Water Lily Dahlia sort of in the center, and then a Gold Light Sunflower just down below it, and what looks like a Cafe au Lait Rose Dinner Plate Dahlia off to the other side. And of course, laurel leaves. So then we're going to talk about the next month. And the next month, which is September. Am I talking about September now? Yes, still getting kind of confused. I still got the sunflowers going. I still got the snapdragons going. I've still got the dinner plate and the decorative dahlias going, as well as the cosmos, the snapdragons, and now I'm getting my snowberries. So the snowberries are something that I haven't had the ability to use in previous years because September can be a pretty wet month for us, and that's when the snowberries start. And they get brown and mushy pretty quickly, but we had a very, very dry September, so they didn't get brown and mushy, so I was able to use them, and snowberries are just gorgeous. You can see how beautiful they are in this bouquet. I mean, look at those two stems of snowberries poking out the top. There's lots of berries on those two branches, and that beautiful little white ball, again, it's white. So it's beautiful to have a white added interest to a bouquet in small amounts. They just sparkle. And you can see with the Costa Silver snapdragons below it, even though they aren't white, you almost can't define what's a snowberry and what's this Costa Silver snapdragon because of the reflection on the snapdragon in the light. And yeah, they're just so stunning. In the center of this bouquet, I have a Labyrinth Dinner Plate Dahlia. Off to that side, I have a red lemon sunflower because now I'm using my red lemon sunflowers as well. I had added them in because I was getting bored of, seed-wise, because I was starting to get bored of the other four colors, as I had mentioned, which is actually only two colors. And so, I would do sunflowers in weekly successions. So after the sunflowers had started blooming, and I realized I wanted more than just the yellow or gold and the white, I decided to start doing the red lemon as well. So the next thing we're going to talk about is my gladiolas. I don't know when they bloom for. They bloomed really weird for me. I planted 80 corms in successions. I planted like 7 or 8 a day over the course of however, that's like over 10 days. I started them in my seed room, in a crate. I took them outside. They didn't bloom. The first one didn't bloom for 4 months. And then they bloomed sporadically from that point onwards. So I have no idea what their actual bloom schedule is. I only know that I absolutely loved using them. And same thing, we're going to talk about Firelight Hydrangea. I absolutely loved using the Firelight Hydrangea. The problem is I bought the plant at the beginning of August, and it only had a few stems on it that I could use, and I used them and I loved using them, but I don't really know its bloom schedule in my microclimate because I didn't buy the plant and it's in a pot until the beginning of August. So I loved using it. I highly recommend that as a focal flower to use, but I can't give you much information on it. Now, I did mention at the beginning of this video that I had done a video on one bouquet a week for 27 weeks. So I'm going to link that here if you want to see more of the bouquets that I have put together and how they travel from the beginning of season through till the end of the season. See you next week. Bye.